Welcome to Fearlessly Feral Living. This is Reverend Karen broadcasting to you from the Woogie Ranch out here in the back 40 of northwestern rural Nevada, where I'm a half an hour away from the nearest gas station and the nearest grocery store. We blend spirituality and psychology to work from the inside out to promote successful, wild, and free living. In other words, fearlessly feral living. Our mission is to provide a strong and unshakable inner foundation that works for successful, long-term living. And our purpose is activating inner self-awareness to live unlimited lives. Now, before I get to today's broadcast, I just want to share a little bit about what's happening out here in the back 40 with me and with Fearlessly Feral Living. For a year and a half, I've been serving as interim minister for the Rio Grande Center for Spiritual Living in New Mexico. And then, of course, there's been COVID and sheltering in place and all kinds of other things. And I only mention this because last June 4th, just 10 short days ago, from the time of recording this podcast, I did my first in-person retreat in 3 years. And I can't describe to you how exciting it was, except that you know how sometimes when you get the chills when something is so beautiful or so awe-inspiring and you just feel this sensation of getting chills on your body? Some people call those God bumps. I got that. I got those chills from the beginning, as soon as I started with my opening remarks, and they did not go away for the rest of the day. It was exciting and it was wonderful, and the feedback I received from those people who attended was so great, and it was just so rewarding for me and I believe for them to do this retreat. Also, I recently purchased a new to me travel trailer. Now, this travel trailer is 22 years old, but it's sweet. It's clean. Everything works on it. And that means that future camping retreats with Fearlessly Feral Living will look a bit different. If you've been following me for any length of time, you know that I've always done an annual spring creativity retreat in Death Valley. Well, that had to stop for a while due to COVID, and 1 year the park systems were shut down. So I haven't done that retreat in a little while. This spring I will be doing it. It's going to look a bit different because we will both be able to use tents and travel trailers. I'll be finishing up my time with Rio Grande CSL on July 1st as they have found their new forever minister, which is really exciting. And after that, I plan to take some time off from interim ministry and get in some travel time with my new trailer, and maybe even schedule a couple of surprise, spur-of-the-moment retreats in the next couple of months. And I only say spur of the moment because I know some of you like to plan these things months in advance. Don't worry, I'll be resuming the Death Valley camping retreat in the spring and maybe do some other stuff further out in the calendar. But just FYI, there might be some sooner things coming up. Okay, now for today's topic. For this topic, I've drawn from the Global Vision themes provided by Centers for Spiritual Living. These themes are a series of 52 weekly themes created by Centers for Spiritual Living ministers for Center for Spiritual Living ministers to use, if they choose, as the basis for their Sunday talks. I happen to love the themes, and I happen to love the process that goes into the creation of these themes. And so I've decided to begin using them for podcast episodes as well. This particular episode is drawn from the June theme of body and from week 2, which is titled Loving This Body. By the way, the theme for the year is Living Everyday Wonder, and isn't that a great theme to have for the whole year? I gave a talk about this Loving This Body topic at the Rio Grande Center on June the 12th. And it was so well received that I decided to adapt my talk to this podcast episode. So here we go. I must confess that it took me a while to get into this topic of the body. So I did what I sometimes do when given a topic to speak about that I can't really resonate with right away. I read and I studied and I put the concepts into my own personal little slow cooker. And then something always pops out when I do that. And something popped out. And what popped out was that I remembered a basic concept in science of mind. We are of a triune nature. Now let me explain that a bit. You know how in standard brand religion, the triune or the Trinity usually refers to the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit? It's all out there stuff. Well, in CSL land, in Science of Mind, we interpret things just a little bit differently. In Science of Mind, our bodies are just one part of our whole. And our whole is that triune consisting of spirit, soul, and body. And those three elements within us are connected in deep, profound, sacred, and powerful ways. When we treat one part of that Trinity with anything less than loving kindness and compassion, when we abuse one part of that Trinity, we are essentially abusing our entire selves because we can't separate them. Our triune nature is who and what we are. And our bodies are just as divine as our spirits and our souls. And consider this. Might be a radical concept for some of you. Consider that our bodies are the way that God experiences the physical. In fact, we were created as a vehicle for just that. For that energy force, that God stuff, that thing that is, to experience the physical. Without that physicality that we provide, God would just be out there in the ether floating around. It really would be the guy in the sky. We're like an anchor for God, with our bodies serving as the path for spirit to experience the physical and express through us. Now, don't get me wrong, God is everywhere present, so it is also a part of our souls and our spirit, but also very much a part of our bodies and our physical beings. Now, some folks like to worship God. They like to say they love God. So I'm here to ask, if we love God and God is everywhere present as we teach around here, then doesn't it also make sense that God is also present in and as our bodies? And shouldn't we then by almost automatic extension also worship our bodies? Wouldn't it behoove us to love our bodies, to treat them with the same respect that we treat God, to revere our bodies, to honor them when they speak to us, to take care of them? I don't know about you, but when I think of God as being everywhere present and when I think of God as being a part of me, that makes me want to think of my body the same way I think about God. And that changes things up for me. Maybe it does for you as well. Now, I just want to add a little aside in here. If you've got a resentment against God right now, contact me. We can work on that. But that's not what I'm going to talk about here for the rest of the podcast. I'm running on the assumption that you're like me, that you love God, that you worship God, that God is a really cool thing to have in our lives. And I want to go back just a bit to this concept of our bodies being the vehicle through which God experiences the physical, because I realize that might be a radical concept for some. But I'm not asking you to take my word for it. Ernest Holmes is the source of my information, along with a lot of other folks. But I'm going to quote Ernest today. And to speak of the body means also to speak of our other parts, our triune nature, because they are woven together in an intricate dance of interdependence. If you look at the table of contents in the Science of Mind textbook, you will see that there are 3 chapters in there. Chapters 3, 4, and 5, called Spirit, Soul, and Body. The fact that Holmes devoted 3 separate chapters to this thing called the triune tells us that it's a fairly overall important concept in the scheme of things. And Holmes says this: if we realize that God is triune and that man is a spiritual likeness of God, we shall see that the whole scheme of life, the whole nature of divine being, is reenacted through man. Let me say that again. The whole nature of divine being is reenacted through man. That's where I get this concept of God being able to experience the physical through us. The whole nature of divine being is reenacted through man. Holmes also said this: the nature of being is a unity with 3 distinct attributes: spirit, soul, and body. So it's really important that we recognize our true nature. We are one being, but we have three parts: spirit, soul, and body. This concept for me is powerful and beautiful. It is the foundation of creativity in my life. And when I teach creativity, I use this concept to do so. I just want to say a few words about spirit and soul as defined in the Science of Mind textbook. Spirit is vital essence, force, energy as distinct from matter. Spirit is all, Holmes said. All. He's talking about God there. God is all, everywhere present. Soul, on the other hand, is the medium through which all that energy passes and gets converted to form. So soul is that law that takes our words and makes it physical. Soul is that law that says yes to what we are affirming and makes it manifest. Our bodies are the form. So when we say our thoughts are powerful and they create our reality, what we are really speaking to is that triune nature and how it works in our lives. Because we're part of that energy, that force, that allness that we sometimes call God. And when God thinks, stuff gets created. We do the same. When we connect with God, we speak the law. We trust the law with the soul to take our words and convert them to form. And then we have the form, which in this case is our bodies. So taken in this way, this means that if we have a body we aren't too happy with, the place to make the changes at the level of spirit. So many times we ignore that piece. We say we don't like how much we weigh, and for most of that means we think we weigh too much. So we go on a diet. We deprive ourselves and we weigh our food and we count our calories and we jump around trying out this keto diet and that vegan diet and that carbohydrate diet, and we drink nothing but grapefruit juice for a while, and we do all manner of really strange things. And that's my point here. We do. How many of us take into consideration our triune nature when we are considering making a change in our bodies? How many of us skip that inner part and go directly to the outer? I believe we are ignoring an essential part of ourselves when we do this. If we're unhappy with our body, we must begin within. All life begins within. So if we have a form that displeases us, the place to change is within. Now, I'm not saying not to diet and exercise if that's what's indicated. I'm saying don't ignore the within piece. I'm saying go within as part of the entire deal and do some exploration in there. Connect with spirit, because when we do that, we accomplish two things. One, we connect with our true selves and we know. Remember that piece? God is a part of us. When we go within and connect, we're connecting on a deeper level with our true selves, our God selves, our God nature, and we know. And two, that connection gives us the strength and the faith to do what we've decided to do about our bodies, no matter what. And when we connect, when we experience that communion, we can also explore those shadow parts of ourselves that allowed us to think that we could abuse our bodies and get away with it. We can expose those shadows to the light and replace those shadows with light-filled concepts, such as an elevation of our own self-worth and a knowingness about what is good and right for us to do. So I have a little story to tell you about this, and I'm telling on myself here, but I don't want to tell on anybody else, so I'm it. I recently stopped eating candy, cake, and pastries. I did it because I'm going to need to have my hip replaced soon, and the doc said it would be easier if I lost some weight. Now, I don't diet. Me and diets, we don't get along. Diet to me is deprivation and abuse. The very idea of weighing my food and counting my calories and budgeting my carbs, well, let's just say I've got better things to do with my time. Plus, if I'm putting that much energy into what I don't eat, guess where my focus is? It's on what I don't get to eat, and that turns on every addictive cell I have in my body, and I end up eating more. So no diets for me. But somewhere along the timeline of all the changes and losses I've experienced in the last several years, I began eating sweets, candy, pastries, cakes. I'd go get gas at the local gas station and go in and get one of those maple bars. Do you know those maple bars they sell in the gas stations? Oh my God, they're so good. I'd get one of those maple bars just as a pick-me-up, you know. I'd go to Tractor Supply and get those soft peppermints for the horses, you know. Those horses never saw a single soft peppermint. I ate them all. So I've been on a several years long sugar binge, and yeah, my body suffered for it big time. I had extreme lulls in energy, and I didn't sleep well at night, and I found myself wanting to eat nothing but sugar. And I had candy everywhere, in all my pockets, in my purse, in my vehicles. Yep, I was truly addicted. So I stopped it. Willy-nilly, I just stopped it. I made a decision to stop eating all that candy, pastries, and cakes, just like that. But in doing so, I also acknowledged that there was some inner work that had to be done, or I was never going to stick with that decision. This is why New Year's Eve's resolutions don't work, by the way, guys. It's because we make a resolution and we never do our inner work. And somewhere along the line, we stop it because we haven't completed the process. We haven't done anything other than make a decision. There's stuff that needs to be done. So I make this decision. That's the outer thing. By the way, I made that decision sitting in the parking lot of my local orthopedic center after visiting the doctor for the first time about my hip, whereupon he told me I have severe osteoarthritis in my right hip, and it's going to need to be replaced soon. And he'd like me to lose a little bit of weight because it would be easier for me. It'd be easier on my hip and easier on the entire process if I did so. So I made the decision. And then I came home and I started my inner exploration. I asked myself, what do I do with this boredom of the after-dinner lull? I asked myself, what purpose was eating all that sugar serving in my life, and how could I fulfill that purpose in a more loving, healthy way? I began that inner journey that is so essential to us because triune nature, gotta do it. I discovered in doing this exploration that for me, it may not be like this for you, but for me, I had a bit more grief work to do. I discovered that I turn to eating sugar when I'm procrastinating, doing something that needs doing. I discovered that I was relying on sugar for an energy boost, all the while forgetting that such a boost is very short-lived and that the crash afterwards is made worse by the consumption of sugar. I discovered a whole bunch of stuff about myself in this exploration. And I discovered that a craving for sugar is now a reminder that I need to go within and ask, what's this all about? I remembered that there are some very physical things going on here as well. My body reacts differently to sugar than most because I'm still an alcoholic, even though I haven't had a drop of alcohol in over 35 years. If you've done any exploration into the field of alcoholism, you know that the chemistry of an alcoholic is just a little bit different. It's kind of like being a little bit pregnant, by the way. The chemistry of an alcoholic is different than the chemistry of people who are not alcoholic. I've still got that chemistry, even though I haven't had a drop of alcohol in 35 years. So sugar takes it and my chemistry changes it, and lots of stuff happens with that. So not eating sugar is a very complicated thing. And yet I've now been off of sugar since March 22nd. Have I lost weight? I don't know. I don't own a scale. Remember, I don't diet. But I feel better. I feel more even emotionally. I'm sleeping better. And when I crave sugar, I go within and ask myself, okay, what's the real deal here? What's really going on here? And then I can address the craving where it really needs to be addressed, at the level of creation. I would never have been able to stick to my decision to stop eating sugar without taking into consideration my triune nature. The lesson here is that our bodies are not separate from the rest of us. They are part of a whole, and we must take the whole into consideration if we want to make a change to any part of that whole. And when we do that, we also get to take into consideration our own sense of self-worth, because we can't love our bodies unless we love our entire selves. And I have news for you. Trying to change our bodies based upon a poor self-image never ever works. If we look in the mirror and hate what we see, we reinforce that self-image every time we sit down to eat. It affects us. Wouldn't it be better to instead remember that we are indeed spiritual beings? And to also remember, as Holmes says, that spirit creates by contemplation. So if we are contemplating how much we hate our bodies, guess what? We're going to contemplate ourselves right into more than hate. Try contemplating love. Try contemplating gratitude. Try being grateful for this magnificent body that allows us and God to experience the physical in so many different and wonderful ways. These bodies that house us, they are wonderful things. Let's love them up. Now, how do we do that? How do we love our bodies? I've learned a few things on this journey. One thing I've learned is that we get to listen to our bodies. Did you know that feelings have a physical component? Try this. Every time you have a feeling that you don't necessarily appreciate, like anxiety or anger or frustration, stop for a minute. Pay attention to the physical sensations associated with those feelings. Ask yourself, where in my body am I experiencing this feeling? For me, sometimes such feelings show up as an experience of fullness in my gut area, like I've got a basketball in there. Or they show up as tightness in my neck and shoulder area. Then there's the good old freezing up feeling, which I consider a form of flight or fight, where I simply don't breathe for a while. That's a real fun one. There will always be a physical component to a feeling. Once you are aware of where that feeling is showing up, consider your triune nature. Consider that part of you that is God. Spirit. Consider what God is. Light. Love. Take that light and that love and direct it to where you're having those physical sensations. Consider soul, the medium. Consider that the breath is the medium in this case. Breathe. Direct your breath to that same area and watch as those feelings dissipate. This is one way to love our bodies. Here's another way. Consider that our bodies were made to move. Bodies love to move. We need to move every day. Now, I'm not saying go to the gym and work yourself into a trembling, quivering mass of weakness because you've pushed too hard. I'm saying walk. Maybe stretch a bit. Ever notice how dogs stretch upon first getting up? This is because they've listened to their bodies and they somehow know that stretching is a good thing to do upon beginning to move about. I'll tell you another little secret about me. Most of you know I have horses. There are a zillion reasons why, but for the purposes of today's topic, I'm going to share with you just one reason. I have horses because they force me to get up and move. Horses need care, daily care. There's manure to scoop up and put in a wheelbarrow. Then one has to move the wheelbarrow to the manure pile and empty it. Every day I go out and spend time with the horses and I clean their house. I incorporate some spirit and some soul into that action. I meditate while I'm scooping horse manure and putting it in the wheelbarrow. I think about that wax on, wax off concept of discipline as a spiritual practice, and I consider the flow of life. In this case, the flow is horses eat hay and convert it to manure, which makes great fertilizer, which is needed to make more hay. I think about the discipline of waxing on and waxing off, and doing this activity every day gives me the discipline to do other things in life. It teaches me about discipline in a very gentle way. I also think about how grateful I am to be outside doing this physical activity, instead of in a boring gym somewhere going nowhere on a treadmill. Oh, I hate that. There's other movement to be done too. There's water troughs that need cleaning periodically, which means ones have to empty the said water trough to do so. That takes a bit of strength. Now, when you clean the water trough on a hot summer's day, it can become a full contact sport, and that cool water just feels so good on the body. Plus, the horses like it too. My mare comes running when I turn the hose on. She stands there and revels in it when I spray her down with the hose and give her a good soak. Then there's bales of hay that need to be wrestled with and moved around. Those bales weigh 100 pounds each. Then there's the horses themselves with all the opportunities to brush and wash and groom and ride. When I can't muster up the willingness to move simply because I know it's good for me, I'll move anyway because those horses are out there needing stuff. Recently, I've been going to physical therapy for the hip thing, and my physical therapist says to me, "You horsewomen are strong." Yep, that's because we move. We build strength when we move, and movement builds upon itself. When we move, the body says, "Yippee!" and it rewards us by in turn moving about a bit easier than it did before. And when we do that, we have the discipline to do the things like physical therapy because we've been out in the corral cleaning stalls every single day. Now, movement for a 67-year-old like me is going to look a lot different than movement for a 30-year-old. But here's another opportunity to use this teaching called Science of Mind. When Ernest Holmes said that we are only as old as we think, he was right. Recently, a minister on our private email, we call it a listserv, our private email thing where we share confidentially stuff between ministers. She shared an experience about how she had been guilty of dumbing down this teaching by forgetting to use it with an issue she was having. She said that while she was likely to forget again, she wanted to remember the strength and the power that this teaching gives us to change our thinking, to change our lives. So here's an example about that. My dad, who was also a Science of Mind minister, water skied until he was in his 80s. He also played trumpet on a professional level until then. He used Science of Mind principles to do that. He used them in a way that I rarely see today, and this is what this minister was speaking to when she said she'd been guilty of dumbing down our principles because we forget how much power this teaching has. We forget to use it. We forget to use this form of affirmative prayer that we call treatment. We go into analysis and repeating our stories over and over and over again, and the theory that we're only as sick as our secrets, so we got to tell them over and over again. And we do all that stuff, and I'm not saying that stuff is not valuable. What I'm saying is this teaching has power, and in and of itself, treatment works. So here's my dad, skiing and playing trumpet professionally until he's in his 80s. Now, over the years, I watched him do other stuff with treatment. I've seen him fix snowblowers and washing machines with nothing but treatment. Really, guys, I saw him do this. I watched him repeatedly defy what is usually considered fact and demonstrate that this teaching is far more powerful than anything else. I remember once he had a heart attack while water skiing. For years afterwards, all he could talk about was what fun the helicopter ride was from the beach to the hospital. He got out of the hospital a few days later, and he and I went and did a wedding together the very next day. Now, this wedding involved a hike to get to where we were going. No problem. This wedding took us out in nature, outdoors, and we went and we did it. Afterwards, he said, "Let's go to Denny's and get breakfast," where he had a Grand Slam. Now, if you've ever been to Denny's and had a Grand Slam, you know it's loaded with sugar and carbohydrates and fat. They're really good. That afternoon, he went water skiing. And I know he did his inner work on this because he never had any heart troubles after that episode. He used to brag to me that he wasn't on any medication either. We can use this teaching, folks. That's my point. We can use this teaching. And the way he used it is a perfect example of what I mean by that. Don't get me wrong. I am not saying don't go to the doctor. I'm not saying don't follow the doctor's advice. I'm saying we can use this teaching because it is powerful. This teaching is not just about feeling good. It's about using it for good in all areas of our life, and that includes our bodies. Whatever limitation we're currently experiencing, try doing a treatment. If you're not familiar with what a treatment is, contact me. I'll help. Or contact a practitioner at your local Center for Spiritual Living. They know how to do this stuff. Or take a class at a local Center for Spiritual Living and learn what treatment is all about. This teaching, yeah, it's powerful. When we take classes, when we come here, when we do this thing called Science of Mind, we learn about things like our triune nature. We might study the textbook or take a class or go within. And then we get to do things like honor our bodies, and then society says, wow, I can't believe you're doing that at your age. I get that all the time. And I just smile and go about my business because I know. That's what we get to do with this teaching. We get to take what the group consciousness says, what the race consciousness says about stuff that is commonly thought of as the truth, and upend it and turn it inside out and upside down and say, yeah, well, I've got this little thing, this little teaching in my life called Science of Mind. And smile and go about my business because I know. So today, we know our bodies and we honor them and we treat them well. And I am knowing this for you and for me. And I thank you so much for listening. Fearlessly Feral Living is a focused ministry of Centers for Spiritual Living. Any contributions are gratefully accepted and are tax deductible. You can get more information and donate by going to fearlesslyferal.org. That's fearlesslyferal.org. You can also become a member of Fearlessly Feral Living for as little as $2 a month. Again, that's tax deductible, by heading on over to Patreon. So patreon.com/fearlesslyferal is where you do that. Until our next episode, I thank you again for listening, and I am knowing good things for you and for me. Thank you so much.